Hey guys, I'm at Barge. I'm a challenger in Gauntlet AI. This is my week 1 challenge 1 video. Purpose of this video is to walk you through my workflow and my process when I'm developing with AI. So I'm gonna walk you through Collab Canvas. This is my first project for Gauntlet AI, and it's a design tool that's real-time and collaborative. So the first thing that I want to point out is before I started Gauntlet AI, I built a reusable structure that could help me kind of format my development and give kind of a prescribed plan or overall process to follow. And there are a couple of things I want to point out with that. One is the level of organization. So I have lots of folders in here. So even the docs folder has lots of subfolders. And I'm going to talk about prompts as well, but this has all the information that we're going to need. I've got the requirements of the project and evaluation criteria as well, which is from Gauntlet AI, kind of how they evaluate the projects. And so I've got all the organization set that I started adding project files, and then we're going to start with developing the PRD. And so what I've done is I've created like I said, a prompt generation system, which has literal prompts and system prompts for developing things in my project. So for example, for generating a PRD, I have a literal prompt that says, let's generate the PRD using the product glue template. And it reminds me, part of this is it reminds me of these different documents to include in the prompt, in the generation of the PRD. This literal prompt references a system prompt, which we've got here. And that one for PRD is here. This system prompts give literal prompts kind of a rubric to follow. Now you might say, oh, well, Matt, you just copied and pasted, you just pasted it into the context window? No. So what I did was I did a recording, a brain dump into the context window here. And then I also included the literal prompt and the system prompt for PRD generation. And it explicitly says in this format to don't just generate the PRD, let's have a conversation about it. And when I'm ready, I'll let you know, and then you can generate the PRD. So I did that. I did that in ask mode. It had a bunch of back and forth. It asked me questions. I answered the question. I had more questions. And then switched to agent mode and boom, developed the PRD. Once we had the PRD, saved it in my foundation subfolder, and then generated the architecture and dev checklist. Once I had all that starter documentation, something I want to call out that I want feedback on is the dev checklist. And this is a task checklist of sorts. It created, and I created modules. I ended up with 15 or so modules for this project, which to me was way too many. I felt this way before I started developing, but I thought, hey, let's just follow my process and we'll see how it goes. Once I started realizing how quickly this project could actually be developed, I definitely realized that having so many modules, is too many. For each module, though, I started at following my system, which is every module is a phase, and every phase has a start, plan, design, build, debugging, reflection, and handoff. And so each one of these are all literal prompts, and these are kind of like handy things that I use to help me, get development. They're redundant. A lot of the stuff is, I'm actually curious, maybe it's not redundant, but I feel I wanted the development to follow a process because I wanted the quality to be high and I wanted to prevent having to refactor things. And so I do a literal prompt and a system prompt for every stage within each phase, a phase being a module. So let's begin a new using the phase start template, and that references this phase starter system prompt, which gives it a rubric to follow for starting, and it generates a document once it's done with that in my docs. If only I could find it. In operations phases. And so these are all of the phases I went through. And one thing you'll notice is that, so yes, there's a document for, start, plan, phase this is for every module, which is cool. But with there being so many modules, I had way too many modules, and this is too arduous a process. And once I saw, I think, Tom's project and realized he did it with one shot, and he was like he grouped this project into just 4 or 5 chunks. And so I transitioned into doing what I just called super modules. Doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of like a group of modules, and did a, plan, start, design, so on and so forth for each super module. And I got more done quicker than before. Something that's nice about this too is that I always have documentation that I can look back on that I can then feed AI if I'm having problems. So what did I do? I did build. Once I finished build, I actually run debug first, and once it's done running debug, then I test manually in localhost. I check everything, and then I might have some troubleshooting, and then I do a reflection and then a handoff. So these are the things that are in my reflection. That I do a handoff. Every module I do in one context window, and I also have a separate branch for that. So I've created a separate branch, done all that in one context window, one phase, and then once I'm done with that phase, I have the handoff document. I go to the next module, create a new context window, and then I start that phase with a start step, referencing this handoff document, which then gives context to what we were just working on. That's keeping my context window percentage maybe too low. Like I'm only getting up to like 40-50% context window. It's possible, I can't remember exactly once I moved to super modules how high that was getting, but it might have only been to like 50-60%. And so I did that, and I've built the MVP. According to me, as far as I can tell, it has all the requirements for their listed in the MVP. It needs a lot of polish. One thing I'm really curious about is getting a lot better UI. I clearly am not following best practices on creating interfaces. This is something I really want to improve on, and I would like feedback on that, please. And I would say, I'm happy that I've stress tested my system. I know how I like to do things, which is I do like to follow an orderly process, because I feel like that helps me while I'm, working in the context window to follow kind of a formula. At least for now, it helps give me kind of guardrails in a sense of security. It's obvious that there are better ways to do things, and I would like to learn those. And I just need to understand like what the inputs and outputs for those are and what I can do to get there. But I think I'm definitely at kind of I would call it the intermediate level, which is like I'm using this very structured process as kind of a crutch. I wouldn't call it a crutch. I think it's a good thing. But I think I'm probably concentrating, like clenching too hard and not letting AI really do what it do what it does. So I'm curious to know your feedback on my project and, in particular my workflow. So I ended up, completing all of the dev checklists for MVP and deployed that. So if I were to summarize, the way I've been doing things so far is having a good organization and good hygiene as far as like everything has a place. If someone were to go into my project, it's dense, but they could definitely, navigate around and see where things are. And, I've been creating a branch, and I've been doing commits often. I also have a reminder script that tells me, hey, commit every 20 minutes. It's in here. It's under scripts. And I think that my process did yield some good results in that I didn't have to refactor, I didn't have to go back. It was kind of slower than, a cohort 1 challenger doing this project. But I think I'm satisfied from the standpoint of being able to stress test the system, and I did build, as far as I can tell, the MVP. But I'm super curious to know what I can improve and how I can learn to do things better. Yeah, so I would say structure, hygiene, regimented process. I'm curious to know your feedback on my prompt generation system. And yeah, that's about it. So Matt Barge, Gauntlet AI, week 1, challenge 1. Appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.